what if TRESE sucks? And this thing that Peter was talking about, where this is a watershed moment, right? A moment in, a great accomplishment in terms of what can be accomplished, with a Filipino production. It's an important moment.
Mm-hmm.
And what if it sucks? Like, do we bring that up? Like, or do we just support? 3, 2. Hey guys, welcome to the T-Dub Show. My name is Kajo and we're coming to you from Honeycomb, Manila. I am joined today by Ralph.
Hey.
And by Peter.
Hi.
And we are going to be talking today about a new Netflix show called TRESE, which was originally created as a comic book by a guy named Budgette, Tan and Kajo Baldisimo. So we just watched it. We just watched all of it today on the day that it came out. And we want to talk about it today. Now, before we really get started, I did want to mention that this is Independence Day weekend. As part of this year's Independence Day, Honeycomb is involved in a kind of like a community campaign or program called Damako Lahiko. And the idea is that we're celebrating the different things that we can experience kind of through our heritage and our ethnicity, both historically and in the present. Look up that hashtag Damako Lahiko. We're supporting it. We're going to be using it. We have a bunch of stuff planned throughout, this weekend and the coming days to celebrate our Filipino heritage. And what better way than with this breakout event, this really interesting. How would you categorize this, Ralph?
Well, I guess it's a great step up for not just comic book adaptations as a whole, but for our own Filipino culture of comics. From what I do understand about how the comics got started, it's also very grassroots or very localized, right? And for it to be on a global platform like Netflix, it's a great step.
Yeah, it's very much an independent comic book, right? Peter, so what's your experience with TRESE in the past?
As the comic,
Yeah, as a comic.
I only heard about TRESE around, I think 2011, when I started running a tabletop role-playing game called World of Darkness. As it turns out, the campaign that I was running for my friends had a very similar plotline to this comic book, which
Okay.
which ended up being TRESE.
Okay.
And then when I just skimmed through it, I didn't really read into it. This is my first time actually diving deep into TRESE.
Okay, so TRESE is originally a black and white independent comic book produced here in Metro Manila in the Philippines, and it's a story that takes place in present day Metro Manila, revolving around like the mythological creatures,
Yep.
right? That are already in the Philippine culture and vernacular,
Mhm.
right? Which ones did you recognize? Because I grew up here partially, and I grew up kind of in a setting where I did not know so many of these creatures. So I do know the words, I do know the names, but reading TRESE before and watching it again now, these are some of the key experiences for me experiencing those characters. But maybe for you guys, knowing more about Duende and Aswang and this stuff, what was your feeling about it?
I love their interpretation of each monster.
Mhm.
I, for one, am familiar with all of the monsters that were shown in the TV show because I was running a supernatural campaign and I was like, I grew up here in the Philippines 100%, so I know all of these ones. Without going into spoiler territory, there were some interesting takes in how they showed the monster. Some of them had features that weren't really in the mythology itself. They just added it in. But for the most part, I think they were creatively done, and at the same time, it was a refreshing take on each monster.
Yeah, I should say that we are doing a completely spoiler-free review today. So the show T-Dubs usually includes spoilers, but I thought it was important for this particular piece of content that we don't go into spoilers. because, and I think this could have changed as we were watching it, that maybe we should go into spoilers. But having seen it, I do think that this is an experience that people should have firsthand, and that it should be spoiler free. So if you're worried that you might get spoiled watching this video, don't worry, we're not going to do that. All right. How about you, Ralph? What was your experience with
So I guess precursors. I never read the comics at all. Like I heard of TRESE, but I've never touched or seen any of the art of the comics. So for the most part, I do believe it's a great adaptation to what the creatures are in most. Well, from what I know of the Philippine folklore of mythology, they are obviously adaptations to modern culture regarding their look sometimes, or whether their powers, quote unquote, affect in the modern world. So I think it's a very great adaptation. It's very modern, or let's say we call it
Contemporary.
contemporary. Yeah, it's up to date, right? It's up to date to what you want to know and what you're trying to reach the audiences about.
So, for me naman, I actually did read TRESE. I don't think I read all of it, but one of our clients before was fully booked, and we're very involved with comic books as a result. Comic books was a big part of the work that we were doing with Fully Booked, which was a client of Honeycomb. And so I read it during that period when we were really pushing really hard on Free Comic Book Day. That's when I first met Budgette, who's the co-creator of TRESE. And I was telling someone yesterday on DM, on like a chat, that I actually think that I'm like the perfect demographic for who this is for. Like, I'm familiar with TRESE, I'm familiar with the mythology. I'm also a longtime subscriber of Netflix who maybe is considering not being a subscriber of Netflix. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm male, 15 to 40. I check all those boxes, and I thought that was interesting coming into this to see whether or not this is something that I found to be very convincing. And you know what? Overwhelmingly, I did think that this was a really good production. Now, let me disclaim that. I think that when consuming media, right, as with anything, right, it always comes back to food and coffee with me, right? But, and you guys have both heard me say this before. Food, like, consuming media should have the tiers that you have with food, right? So you have your steakhouse, your fine dining, your 5 stars, your Michelin star, right? And then you have your family restaurants, right? Those are what your Pancake House, right? Your
Denny's.
You go out for pizza, right? And then you got your straight up fast food meals, which is like McDonald's, Jollibee, right? And then you can go all the way down to like street food, right? Street food, Angel's Burger. But the idea is that there are many different tiers of what you're supposed to enjoy. And I thought that for me, if TRESE could come across as a Yum Burger at Jollibee, then it would be a win, right? If it could just be junk food, something you consume once, and then that would be a win, because that's what a lot of anime is. I'd go so far to say that TRESE is not fast food. It's not Michelin star, but it's definitely in that like Denny's, Pancake House range, right? A good once a week solid base hit, you know. There's room for improvement. There's definitely room for improvement, but it's really good, especially for Netflix.
Yeah. I felt some Castlevania vibes from this when I was watching it. I think, did they take inspiration from Castlevania in some of the visuals, the colors, the gore? I think Castlevania is more gory, of course, but I think, maybe it's just me, but I think that TRESE, the creators of TRESE, took some cues from Castlevania. They made it work, but
Do you mean the Castlevania, the series, the
series.
other
the
animated
series.
feature?
Yep.
So you're saying that the creators of this animated feature took some cues from that animated feature. Is that correct?
Yep.
All right. What do you think?
Actually, I was gonna dive into this later on, like look up. I don't know who the production company or the animating company is, but first of all, the director of TRESE is the same director as Legend of Korra. So she
Really?
has history. I don't quote me. I need to double check. But I read something earlier. It's like she was the same one because they're states based and is she was the director for Legend of Korra. And the animation wise, I actually don't think it's very more Castlevania. It's actually I feel like very more Korra and a bit more Young Justice in terms of the art style.
That's true. So
I
I was
see the Young Justice one.
you see what? What
I
do you
see
say?
Young Justice.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I see both of those, but the thing that this thing really reminded me a lot of, in the art style and in the, also in some of the storytelling, was an independent comic that was published by I think Image Comics, called The Sword, and it was written and drawn. It was co-created by these guys called the Luna Brothers. And look that up. Look that up because I thought that this was very, very close to that. And that for a long time was considered one of the best independent comics in production. And I think I say that as, I guess, as flattery, right? That I felt impressed on that level. Now, there were moments throughout the production where you'd see better animation and just okay animation, right? But never, I didn't feel like it dropped below, a standard, a pretty solid standard. So this is Ralph checking whether or not it's actually the person who directed Legend of Korra involved in this production. In the meantime, I do want to talk about the world building because this is an aesthetic that we have not seen in anime, in animation up until this point, which is a very hand painted, in depth look at Metro Manila. And I thought that was really cool. I thought that was something very interesting to see. We spent a lot of our friendship together in Cubao, right? And you really felt a lot of it. There are moments where you feel like you're in Cubao. There are moments you feel like you're in like Makati Cinema Square, right? The police station looks like the police station. That stuff communicates really well. And I remember playing Cyberpunk at around Christmas time of last year, right? When it first came out. I think that was around Christmas time, right? And when I was playing Cyberpunk 2077, I remember running around the world and everyone was enamored by this world. And I remember thinking, oh, so this like super exotic world reminds me a lot like Cubao Aurora, like Ilalim, right?
Guadalupe Mandaluyong.
Yeah. It seriously, like those are things that really went through my head, that people find it to be so interesting. Like this is a AAA title to be set in this world. But for me, like I grew up here, I grew up in Singapore, I grew up in Hong Kong. And a lot of Cyberpunk is basically Hong Kong meets Cubao. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And they did a really good job here with like telephone lines and stuff, the wound up wires. I thought that was really cool. I thought it was a really interesting aesthetic. What did you guys think? How about you, Peter?
I was fanboying the entire time deep inside because, as I've mentioned earlier, I was running this campaign set in Manila. It's a tabletop role-playing game called World of Darkness. You can look it up. And in that setting, it's literally Metro Manila and Makati and some parts of Laguna and Cavite where supernaturals are secretly living within the community. And then one of my players, Dennis, this is for you, exposed the supernaturals for who they are. And then they started making moves in the city. And that was all just in my head before. But then I'm seeing it in the screen right now. And I was like, this is exactly how I imagined it to go. And they delivered on it perfectly. Like what Kajo said, it really felt like you're in Manila or Makati or wherever. They, I think the artists themselves, were they Filipino or were they also foreign artists?
So this I don't know. I actually don't know where it was produced, who produced it, and we'll dive into language in just a bit. But my understanding is that it was not produced here in the Philippines.
So, well, quit looking really quickly. So he's not for Legend of Korra, he was a storyboard artist, and it's a he, not a her. And he's also Filipino, so apparently he has understanding of that.
Mhm.
Some notes were there was like there are other Filipinos on the team, so I guess there's influence, but it was not produced here locally.
And it also felt even the slums, the slummy area. There's a scene there where it's set in the poorer parts of Manila.
Mhm.
They really did feel grimy, slimy, and it really felt like you're there.
It felt like you could smell
You could
the
smell
location.
The police. Yep.
Yeah.
So I had a problem with that. So it felt a bit too real. Like that's a thing is with I guess watching other animation, and because a lot of those settings are foreign to us, it makes the escapism a bit more true, right? But here it's for us, it's a bit more realistic, and it's kind of not scary per se, but it's kind of it's kind of hits home.
Jarring.
Not that far, but it's like oh, I know where that is, but in a way that's I don't want to go there sometimes.
All right.
All right.
So this brings us to language. Okay. And I think that this is the big question of TRESE is this actually for us? Because is it really escapism for us? Or because if you notice, and I don't think that this is a spoiler, we don't spend a lot of time establishing other parts of the world as normal. We jump almost directly into this supernatural thing, right? It's not like, sometimes they do it in storytelling where like we'll talk about the world, you'll see, spots inside this universe,
Right.
and then, a door opens and it turns out there's this whole other world, right? Take the red pill, take the blue pill kind of situation, right? Jumping straight into that was probably something that you would do if people already knew what the environment was like, right? But at the same time, and again, coming to language, we watch this in English, right? We didn't watch the whole thing together. So Ralph watched
I watched
separately.
the first episode in Filipino at Tagalog. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
And what was that experience like?
it was very interesting. It was very like to be very blunt, is that there's differences in the quality of voice acting. And you would notice some I did it with the subtitles, so I could compare like what was being said and what was being translated as.
That's
which
kind of
was-
like a pro anime watcher trick, right?
Yeah, but it's interesting because like I understand because our language doesn't translate fully. So actually the question I also had was it written in Tagalog first and then translated, or was it English and then translated?
So I would say that the screenplay appears to have been written in English.
Yeah, for sure. Like the animation shows that, right? If you watch their lips and everything, it translates into the English audio, not
Well,
the Tagalog.
And this is a key reason why we watch it in English, other than the fact that the cast in English is stellar, right? What's his name who plays Zuko and Rufio?
Yeah.
What's his name?
All I remember is Talagbusaw was voiced by Steve Blum.
Steve Blum was in there.
Dante Basco.
Nicole Scherzinger. Dante Basco.
Dante Basco. There we go.
Absolutely. Like Rufio is like a key character for my childhood. And the idea of a young Filipino, right? If you guys don't remember Rufio from Hook,
Yeah.
that's the guy.
Yeah.
And he also plays Zuko in Avatar: The Last Airbender, which is another kind of anime inspired. When we dive into whether or not English was a good choice to watch it in, after watching it, and take this with a grain of salt because I did not watch it in Filipino. Watching it in English, I thought that was a very rich experience because kind of seeing it in English and then having them drop into Filipino for spells and for
Cusses.
conjuring. What's that?
For cusses.
For cusses, yeah, for swearing. Like I felt like that was a really rich experience to have that kind of three layers, because then you would have things like Ad Astra, brought into the discussion, right, into the screenplay, and so you had this 1, 2, 3 tiers of language happening. It does get weird sometimes when there's mixed dialogue, like
Yeah.
when it slips into Taglish and then there's forced subtitles that appear on screen. But that's super minor, in my opinion. What did you guys think of the language selection watching it in English? Like, how do you feel that affected your experience?
Some of it threw me off.
Really?
Some of it, some of the ways that they weave the Tagalog with English felt really off. Like it's not, it doesn't sound natural for a local to speak like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's I think the elephant in the room, and I was hoping to wait before we discuss this, but there is an element of Jokoy impersonation in almost all of the English dialogue.
Yes.
In yeah,
That is right.
yeah, it's very specific, right? Like
Yep.
like that's exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like somewhat
What,
an
like a Filipino accent
Yeah.
is perceived, not necessarily perceived, but like what's commonly heard, I guess.
yeah,
How they
and
interpret, how foreigners interpret the Filipino accent.
We should double check if any of these actors are actually Filipino.
well, no, a lot of them have Filipino
of them.
heritage, but remember that if you don't live here, or you didn't grow up here, your experience with the language
For sure.
will sound like that,
Yeah.
right? So to them, that's authentic.
That
Right?
is true.
But I
That's-
gotta say, Steve Blum made a really good Filipino accent.
Yeah.
And overall, the way he spoke, I'm not gonna say specifically which character he played, but when you hear him say it, you'd feel like the character is voiced by a Filipino or a Phil-Am.
Yeah, I thought the lead, TRESE herself, Alex TRESE, was incredible. I
Yep.
thought that the Filipino and English for that was very, very well coached. And there are moments where there are words that are kind of like salitang hiram, so like they're both English and Filipino,
Yeah.
right? Salitang hiram, for people who don't speak Filipino, literally means borrowed
Borrowed
word, right? Or borrowed saying, and sometimes those would come into play, but in general,
Yeah.
I thought that she was the strongest link in the whole thing.
She's Shay Mitchell, by the way, from Pretty Little Liars.
Shay Mitchell.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's part Filipino.
Okay. Did you guys watch Pretty Little Liars?
Maybe.
I did.
It's
I
taking
don't- okay, well, that's an admission if I.
it's taking Peter. It took Peter a long time to
Yeah.
answer that. I don't think I've never watched Pretty Little Liars, so
Like, I've
I
seen it,
don't
but
know.
I don't think I've watched
I don't know what
it.
Shay Mitchell looks
Yeah.
like. I really don't.
Either.
I know what Nicole Scherzinger looks like. I
Mhm.
definitely know what Dante Basco looks like.
I do feel like the pacing or a lot of exposition is happening that kind of pulls you out, and the animation
Mhm.
isn't matching all the time to it. There's a lot of
Mm.
explaining without either visuals or literally one of the characters just talking.
So
and
I-
over explaining.
I do think that the pacing, on that note,
Mhm.
is a key reason why you should binge watch this and watch the whole thing end to end. Because if you watch it episode to episode, you might feel some of those pacing issues. But if you watch the whole thing, it's like when all these people who didn't like X3, and we've talked about this before. You don't feel the same way. But I remember watching the X-Men movies like in the years they were released, right? And a lot of people would comment about like how they didn't like how it ended. They didn't like the pacing for X3. But if you watch them all like back to back to
Yeah.
back, and the same is true for the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot that you can forgive in terms of pacing and story choices if it's watched as one. So that'd be my recommendation. Definitely watch TRESE. Watch it. I would say first in English if you want like the original experience. And then maybe watch it in Filipino for like entertainment purposes or analysis
It's
for
just 3 hours.
or if you just want to support those voice actors, right?
Yeah.
If you wanna if you want to get that hyper local experience. Now, if you do that, you'll lose, and I think it's important to mention, you will be losing that element of switching from one language into Tagalog, right? Into Filipino. And the thing that I really liked about that was that it presented Filipino as something inherently magical, that you couldn't just translate it to English and it would mean the same thing, right? So it's like, no. She can't just be using any knife. She has to be using this kind of knife, right? She can't just say any words. It needs to be these Filipino words. And while she will be using those same Filipino words in a fully Filipino telling or dialogue, right? If you use the Filipino language, which by the way plays by default when you start playing the show. If you press play on Netflix, it just starts playing in Filipino. And I thought that was strange because it says there English original.
Well,
But you will lose that before that. You do lose that experience if you go to straight Filipino, unless we are missing something we don't know, and she starts speaking in like I don't know, yeah, Chabacano or something, right? You're saying
no, it's just like, well, even for animation, it doesn't always do that. Wherein it does, like, it says original sometimes in English, but it will jump into whatever language it was intended for. But again, that's a minor thing. It might be location wise.
Yep.
Did they intend it to happen that way here in the Philippines?
What do you mean?
Like, did Netflix set it to play in Filipino only here in the Philippines?
I'm gonna say probably. I'm gonna say yes, right? Because
Which is not wrong.
no, I don't think there's a wrong or right about it. I think that's just
It's a choice.
the way it was. It's just a choice, yeah. Especially if you, I mean, all of the promotions have that Lisa Soberano name on it, right? As TRESE, right? So that's the expectation. I would like to watch. I'll probably watch the Lisa Soberano version at some point. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but that is a reason to rewatch it. And a lot of stuff that you stream, a lot of stuff that you watch, there's no inherent reason to rewatch it. And if you are a Filipino and you do understand the language, this is a built-in reason to do that. Yeah. All right. Closing thoughts.
TRESE was great. I mean, no joke. It was it's a great show. It's a solid step forward for the Filipino comic book and animation industry. It's well done. It could be done better, of course, in time. But for that kind of show to be our breakout, is it our breakout? Will you consider it our breakout in?
It's definitely the first of its kind.
Yeah.
Like, I can't think of any like anime
Filipino,
style production that was made on this level, especially coming from something so grassroots.
Yep. For that one, TRESE is a great show, and you should definitely watch it. And just like what Kajo said, start watching it in English first, so that you'll feel the magic of the Filipino language. You will find you might find the narrative jarring, and I'm just gonna say this right now. It feels like a show don't tell kind of thing in the first few episodes, and that was great. At some point, it became an exposition dump.
Yeah, it really does get to a point where they're trying to sew the whole thing together.
Yep.
Yeah, and again, that is a pacing issue where, as I was saying, just watch the whole thing, like binge it, and you won't feel it.
Yep.
There is an element in the beginning where it feels very episodic, but and I was concerned the first two episodes that this is quite a bit episodic, but they do a good job of bringing it all together in the end. It feels quite exhaustive, so I would like to see what the follow-up to TRESE will be, if there will be a season 2. But mostly because this has a lot of the elements that you have with a what do you call that? Like a rookie record, like the first time someone records their album, right? And then they come out a freshman album.
Yeah.
And then when you come out with your sophomore album, right?
It does a lot better. Yeah.
No, it usually drops in quality.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because, dude, think about it. You're making a record when you're like 21 years old. You've been writing songs since you were like 13. So you have like 8 years worth of music to pick from, right? And then the next year, you got to record another album. And that album is basically all the stuff that was left over and
1 year.
maybe 1 year worth of experience, right?
That's fair.
So that's why you always have that sophomore slump. And that's something I'll want to see is, okay, Come on, budget. Come on, Kajo. What else you got?
Well, that's the thing though. Is like one is like for a lot of animation so far that we've seen is that the more seasons they get into, the better it gets. Actually, Castlevania is one. Avatar is such a great example. Like season one, if you look at the animation, though you don't remember it that way, it was pretty bad. But when we got to book 2 and book 3, it's amazing. And that's the thing. You kind of put the first book into the animation in your head as the current season. It's pretty great. So I think
But that also happened in a transition in
technology,
like
and
technology
animation.
and
That is
standards.
true. That is also true. But budget is of course a huge thing about it, right?
He's talking about money,
Yeah.
not about
Oh, sorry.
budget.
My bad. My bad.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that said, Budget, the creator, is a huge thing here, and I would really love to see Budget retain creative control moving forward.
Yeah.
Because, well, honestly, this is not something that they're going to be able to do without him, in my opinion. Because like he's done all the research. It's really sound. The world building is super solid. Now, I was having this discussion with I asked someone on Twitter who's in the Philippine geek and comic media, and he sent me a DM. So he started chatting with me on Facebook, and for that reason, I'm not going to name who he is. But I was bringing up with this person that, hey, what if TRESE sucks, right? What if TRESE sucks? And this thing that Peter was talking about, where this is a watershed moment, right? A moment in a great accomplishment in terms of what can be accomplished, with a Filipino production. It's an important moment.
Mhm.
And what if it sucks? Like, do we bring that up? Like, or do we just support because of what it is and who Budget is and the cultural significance of the moment? And I'm really thrilled that
It didn't suck.
that we don't need to have that discussion because it was
It's a great-
amazing.
yeah.
It was great. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. Netflix, give these guys more money.
I think
I sincerely believe that. Give these guys more money because you're only starting to scratch the surface of what's possible here.
I think one of the biggest issues here that they will face is how many Filipinos will pirate this. How many viewers will pirate this film
Yeah.
instead of watching it via Netflix as intended?
Yeah, well, luckily Netflix has that 150 peso, I think, plan, the mobile plan. And I think something like 90% of people who watch Netflix in the Philippines watch on mobile anyway. So,
They still get pirated though.
they still
but
do get pirated.
Everything does, right? It's just
Yeah, so, but again, if you can watch this without pirating, I would encourage you to do so. If you can get your hands on like a Netflix free trial, usually those are like 7 days, and or like a month sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. And you can watch the whole thing in one day. It's 6 episodes, like 3 hours and a bit maybe. And it's absolutely worth your time. That Up Dharma Down song in the very end is really good. And I was actually waiting for it because like every episode it would cut when it jumps to the start of the next episode. And watching that final credit scene with the Up Dharma Down music, it really helped settle the story inside of my mind. And there is a little surprise at the very end, so don't stop watching. Like, watch the whole thing, let the credits run, and you get that nice Thanos moment after credit scene. After credit scene. So do watch the whole thing.
And don't pirate it. Please watch it via Netflix.
Yeah, please don't pirate this. Please don't pirate it at all. In this discussion I was having with in this chat, this guy said that this potentially opens the door for a live action production
That
of.
would be cool.
You think that would be cool?
Yep.
Why do you think that would be cool?
It would be cool to see the Filipino monsters from our myths done well on screen.
Yeah, but isn't that a huge jump forward? Like in terms of,
Definitely, but it's a vision.
that's
It's
true.
up there.
That's true.
It's a goal to work forward from.
How do you feel about that, Ralph?
one. I would like a anthology about the myths first before we hit season 2, because I think that would fix a lot of exposition and a lot of world building for context for a lot of non-Filipino viewers.
Define anthology.
Like an episode for each type of monster or type of myth or story, right?
Outside of the
No, it's in the world of TRESE, but like just a let's call it a sub season or like a separate spin-off almost.
but do we have the protagonist of Alex? in
Doesn't
the-
necessarily could be his dad, her dad, sorry,
Mhm.
or previous protectors of the realm, right? It could be about different, like literally going back into the history of Filipino culture, setting it to when they were first discovered, and all of that stuff.
Don't you think that's like a third season kind of thing?
I feel like the ones we've already seen, like the Tikbalangs, the lightning gods, which I'm not actually quite sure who they are. I know,
Mhm.
honestly, it's like it could, like, I think the Tikbalangs alone created a nice story in themselves. We could create another hero there of the years of the centuries past rather than put in the present, and then the new season will just contextify them into something. Okay, this is what's happening to them now.
So maybe
It doesn't honestly have to be an animated series either, right? It could be just something the TRESE team actually does. I mean, the comic team.
like a maybe like a YouTube series,
Yeah.
or like an online comic book that's already paid for by
Yeah,
Netflix,
exactly,
right?
right?
Yeah.
Like it's a storyboard, basically,
Or
shared.
let the story revolve around the precinct facing the supernaturals, like the policemen, instead of the magical side of things of
But
the protagonist.
That just ends up with all of them dead.
not necessarily.
Majority of the time.
Not necessarily.
Right.
I'm not gonna spoil things.
Yeah.
The police did a bang up job surviving up until a certain point, and it will be very, very interesting to see normal people facing supernaturals and how they deal with it.
Right. So I actually come down the other side. I personally do not want to see a live action version of this. I think that anime is a really good, or an animation is a really good it's kind of the perfect medium for it already. I just like to see a better version of it, hopefully an upgraded version. And but there's one exception. I would love to see TRESE in an open world third person video game.
I think someone's making that actually, but not TRESE world, but like just Philippine mythology.
But TRESE is so important. The character Alex TRESE is so important to selling this story and selling the universe. So
That'll be interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
Basically, survivor horror game where you just encounter things.
yeah, connecting the dots. It could even be very similar to the current story. Anyway, that's just my thought.
I wouldn't like to see a live action unless it has one movie for sure. No, not a movie, because it doesn't do it. There's not enough time to tell the same story, right? And if it was a series, maybe it was if it's like a high budget series, maybe not something we can expect locally. If I'm being very honest, I'm trying to think of what like live action shows that had a lot of monsters that were done very well. That didn't feel like a cheap.
I don't think there are any.
I know, right? So that's the thing.
Yeah,
No to live action.
no live action. Yeah. Well,
Okay, guys.
yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? Like, and again, like I am the kind of comics reader that thinks that some comics should just stay comics, right?
Right.
And I think that's a fair assessment. I think I may have thought this about TRESE at some point, and clearly I'm wrong. Like, this is a really good way to get out and be in front of more eyeballs. And with that, we wrap up our coverage of TRESE, the new animated series on Netflix, a true success story of a Filipino independent publication making it all the way to the world stage. Congratulations to Budgette and to Kajo Baldisimo, the co-creators of TRESE. Wish you guys continued success and continued good luck, and that people continue to watch it. And thank you guys for watching the show. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Ralph and Peter.
You're welcome.
And thank you all for watching. I've been Kajo. Make sure you follow along on Instagram. I'm at Kajo Kosha. Follow at Honeycomb Manila as well. And come visit us here. Send us a DM if you want to come visit us here in Honeycomb. This video setup that we use is free to anyone who comes and works here. So yeah, if you guys want to record a podcast, just come on by. It doesn't cost anything. It really doesn't cost anything. No, I mean, you got to be a member. You got to be a member. So it does cost something. But it's about
It's pretty good.
really, it's about 75 pesos an hour with a coffee, with everything. So just saying. All right. Wish you guys good luck. Wish you guys good health. Wish you guys an excellent Independence Day. Remember to look at the hashtag, the Makolahi ko. And